In the summer of 1665, this man buried more people than he could count. He never wept, not once, not for a single one of them. 360 years later, I watched him fall to his knees beside a hospital bed, sobbing over a complete stranger. To understand why, you have to understand what he was and what we've forgotten how to fear. They called him a doctor. He wasn't. Not the way you'd mean it. He couldn't cure the plague. Nobody could. That long, terrible beak on his mask, it wasn't for show. They packed it with flowers and dried herbs because they believed the smell of death was the thing that killed you. They were wrong, but they were trying. His job wasn't to heal. His job was to count, to record the dead, to be the last face a dying stranger ever saw, so that no one had to die alone. Think about that for a second. In his world, the very best a healer could offer was company. And he carried a small wooden box in that bag everywhere he went for 4 years. In all that time, he never once opened it. I'll tell you what was inside, but not yet. So I used the device I created to open up a temporal bridge, and I brought him here, to now. I thought the city would break him. The towers, the headlights, 1,000 glowing screens screaming at once. I thought he'd come apart at the sheer loudness of us. He didn't. He stood in the middle of a street that never sleeps, wearing a coat built for a graveyard, and he just watched. Calm, patient, like a man reading a room he doesn't trust yet. That was my first mistake. I assumed a man from the past would be amazed by the size of our world. He wasn't measuring its size. He was looking for something, and I had no idea what. So I tried to impress him. I showed him a phone, the entire human library sitting in his palm. He turned it over twice and handed it back. I showed him a car, a plane crossing the sky, a pharmacy shelf stacked 10 feet high with cures his century would have burned people for. Nothing. And I'll be honest, I got frustrated, which is embarrassing to admit now, because I was showing off. Look how far we've come. Look how clever we are. Look what we built. Look, look, look. And he stopped. He turned to me, and through that mask, in a voice like gravel dragged over stone, he asked me one question. Where do you keep your dying? Not my shops, not my machines, not my toys, my dying. And that's when it hit me. I'd been showing him the wrong thing this whole time. He didn't care how far we'd come. He cared about one thing and one thing only, whether we'd finally solved the thing he never could. So I took him to a hospital. He walked the halls slow, studying all of it. The machines breathing for people who couldn't breathe for themselves, the clear bags dripping life back into someone's arm, a monitor beeping steady, that little green line climbing and falling, the sound of a heart that simply refused to quit. And then we reached a room with a child in it, burning with fever. The kind of fever that, in his century, wasn't an illness. It was a goodbye. He knew that fever. He'd watched it take thousands. He braced himself to watch it take one more. A nurse stepped in, glanced at a chart, adjusted a line, and said to no one in particular, "She'll be home by Friday." Home by Friday. And that's when his hands started to shake. He reached up, and for the first time in the entire journey, he took the mask off. Underneath was just a man. Tired eyes, a face that had seen far too much, wet with tears he'd been saving for 360 years. And he reached into his bag and took out that small wooden box, the one he never opened. Inside were names, folded scraps of paper, hundreds of them. Every soul he'd sat beside as they died. Every single one he couldn't save. He'd carried them his whole life because he believed someone, somewhere, should remember they were here. He set the box down at the foot of that little girl's bed, a girl who was going to be home by Friday. And he whispered, "It was possible. It was always possible." We live inside his miracle. The thing he prayed for, bled for, buried thousands of people waiting for. We call it Tuesday. We walk straight past it every day. The pharmacy, the clinic, the ambulance we're annoyed to be stuck behind in traffic. We've forgotten that for almost the entire history of being human, death simply won. Every time. No appeal, no Friday. He didn't pity us. He didn't envy us either. He just looked at me and asked the only question that ever mattered to him, the one I still can't answer. How many of mine could you have saved? And then he went quiet. Because we both already knew. All of them. Every single one. And then it was time to send him home. The temporal bridge opened the way it always does. A low hum, a ring of amber light, his own cold century waiting on the other side. He looked back once at the wooden box, the names, all of them, and he left it there. I think he wanted them to stay, in the one place that could have saved them. Then he walked to the edge of the bridge the way he'd walked those plague streets, slow, patient, unafraid. And before he stepped through, he turned to me one last time and he said, "I'll go back to my dying, but now I have something to tell them. That it ends. That one day, it ends." Then he stepped onto the bridge, back to the candlelight, back to a world that would never see what I'd shown him, and the amber light folded shut behind him. And just like that, I was alone again. Anyway, if you made it all the way here and your chest feels a little tight, good news. That's just empathy. It's not the plague. You're going to be fine. Probably. Go drink some water. Hit that like button. It tells the algorithm to keep dragging lost souls out of history so we can all be emotionally devastated together, as a family. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And drop a comment. Who should I pull through the portal next? Just, please, somebody happy this time. This man left me a box of names and I have genuinely not been okay since.